Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Women Like Me Stories in Business. I'm your host, Julie Fairhurst, and today I am here with one of our newest Women Like Me authors. And I'm so excited to talk to Kandace Stoneman, and to dive into what it was like for her to write her story, and then talk a little bit about her story because she's got some amazing lessons in there for all of us. So, first, this is the book. So, Women Like Me, the space before and after. So, you know how we all have that space in between? This is what we're writing about. And it's true stories of women who crossed it and were never the same. So, Candace's chapter is chapter 11. And when I assign chapters to all the writers, I believe in numbers, and I believe there's a number thing. And so a number 11 was meant for you. This
Ah,
number 11 was certainly meant for you. So Candace's title is The Courage to Live Without Regrets. So before we get into your story, Candace, let's talk a little bit about the writing process, because I think this is the first time you've ever written in a book. Is this the first time?
it is, yeah.
Yeah. And so how did you find the process?
Oh, it was such a great process. And just want to say, like, I'm really happy to be here with you on your podcast again.
Oh,
And so thanks for having me.
you're welcome.
Yeah. And so the process was, I would say, quite cathartic, actually. You know, being able to figure out like what I want to say. But then as I was writing it, I feel like there was just new levels of depth within my own healing journey that because every time you'd write this tender part and then you've got some tears streaming down your face. And so it's just like I just needed to heal that version of me or just hold a little bit of space and some love for that tender moment. And so it was like a really beautiful experience that I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for it.
Oh, so I know in the beginning you had a little bit of a tough time getting started. What do you think that was?
I did. And, I felt like our initial conversation where we were like just discussing what my chapter would be about,
Yeah.
I felt that was really helpful and productive. And I wouldn't have thought to uh, structure my sentences and paragraphs in the way without your feedback and your wisdom. So I certainly appreciate that. But also, I probably went into the land of perfectionism in
Hmm.
terms of overthinking, like what I'm actually going to write, what stories to include, um, just wanting it to feel like this level of perfect when like does perfect even really exist?
Right. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think I just had probably some resistance because you're going to that, tender part of you again. And I think I also just was like, this is my like probably had subconsciously like this my one shot, unless I of course write something more, which down the road I might actually, because it was actually really great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think there was also probably just that vulnerability. Sometimes when we put ourselves out there in a big or visible way, we can have what I call like a vulnerability hangover. And pardon me, I think I can sometimes feel that, especially just writing something so personal and close to my
Mm.
heart. So yeah, there was like lots of layers, but through it all, it was such a healing, like cathartic, beautiful experience.
Yeah. Once you got going, there was no stopping you.
Yeah, it felt like just getting started was tricky. And I remember reaching out and just kind of, like, oh, I should be handing more in. But you said, just write. Like, don't
Yes.
overthink it. Don't over edit. Just
Mhm.
write. Like,
Yeah.
and that I needed to hear that because I
Yeah.
was overthinking it. And of course, the first version is so basic. And then that's where I could be like, okay, I have like the bones, and now I can go back and jazz it up
Yes.
and add these interesting parts to the story to make the reader want to read the next sentence and the next paragraph, which,
Yes.
is a big part of writing it, which I hadn't thought about before until
Yeah.
you mentioned that. So yeah, it was,
Yeah.
once I got going, it was good.
Perfect. Well, I think you did a fabulous job. And sometimes there's some writers that just jump in and away they go. And then there's others of us that need a little bit more thought process, more. And like you say, we're not sure. You want to throw all of it, the kitchen sink in there, but then you have to realize that there's so much that we put into a story that we don't necessarily need to be there. And you start to, and just like you say, you go through that first draft, you get into your second one, you're like, oh, and you start to see it again. So I'm just so thankful that you went and you got it done and we got it published, and it's just wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about your story. So
Yeah.
I want to talk about the very first paragraph because I think that says a lot. So you say, I'm halfway through the door into my apartment before my clothes start coming off. The shoes go first, kicking off somewhere between the entryway and the hallway, bouncing against the closet with a dull thud. The bra doesn't even make it to the bedroom. It gets launched like a slingshot towards the laundry basket and lands nowhere near it, which at 24 was a perfectly reasonable way to live. Why don't you tell us, like, what was happening? Because all you wanted to do, it wasn't like, oh, I'm home, I just need to relax. You were headed somewhere.
Yeah, I think it was really a sort of, I don't know, I wasn't conscious of what I was even doing at the time, but just this like inner urgency to like get me out of here and get me out of here, really, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
And so by removing all these external like get off the jewelry, get off the bra, get the hair out of my neck,
yeah,
and just find some peace or like some respite in
yeah.
the day in what I was feeling,
Yeah.
um, physically, mentally, emotionally, like all the ways. So it was
Mhm.
just probably this real like escapism, like avoidance
Mhm.
energy that like took over that I was
Yeah.
like, blah, just now.
Well, you were working with folks. Was it home care that you were doing, or what was it?
It was hospice care. And so,
Was it in home or was it within a?
no, I was at an interior health
Oh, okay.
facility where there was, a lot of patients who were at the end of life and but people who were just young too. And I worked with people who were not also like I also worked outside of hospice, people like in long-term care,
Mm,
young people who just suddenly became a quadriplegic or like the woman who was in hospice, like she was just around 50 and she was just in Disneyland with her family the year before. And like,
mm,
I'd sit at the bedside with these people, and that was one of the things I liked about hospice is we could sort of slow down, and they really just needed these conversations that
mhm,
I'm automatically drawn to have that emotional connection with people. So yeah, it wasn't the death that was the hardest part. It was just hearing people's regret and hearing them try to right their wrongs in their limited time left, and just yeah, again kept hearing like regret would come up,
mm,
and you know their relationship with their kids, their adult kids are estranged, or they haven't
mm.
heard from them in a long time, or
Aw,
the family dynamics that would often play out when, a parent is
yeah,
passing away or whatnot. So it just at 24, without having the skills that we need in order to do such heavy, intense work,
yes,
it was just more than like I was equipped for at the time,
yeah,
and which
yeah,
really led me to my path. But
yes,
yeah, it was just a lot.
yeah. And I can certainly see the coming in and just wanting to shed the day
Hmm.
and then jumping under the blankets and just shutting out everything. I mean, that's a lot to deal with, but you're right. A 24-year-old girl,
Hmm.
that's that's a lot to deal with. And you say in your book that there was guilt math on the on what was impossible and for to reconcile. What right did I have to complain about being tired or sad when other people were losing their loved ones forever?
Yeah, and not to dismiss, I think I was in this place of probably dismissing my own experience because I
Hmm.
didn't have the insight to be like, well, both can be true at the same time.
Hmm.
And so it was like, who are you? Like, and I was in this place of really being self-critical and was like, who are you to be sad and tired and complain? That guy can't even scratch his nose, and that person will never even see their grandkids grow up. And so it was this
Yeah.
real, conflict internally where I'm having a hard time, but like theirs is way worse. And so I'd feel guilty for feeling bad or,
Hmm.
feeling like this is hard. It's like, oh, poor you. Like you get to go to sleep for 8 hours and go about your life and like scratch your nose when it's itchy. And like you don't have to ring a call bell and, you don't have to do all this hard goodbyes. And so again, just not having skills to
Yes.
quiet I call it like the itty bitty shitty committee.
Yeah.
You know,
No, exactly. And I can understand that guilt. I can see how people are dying. People are at their,
yeah.
and then to hear their regrets and sadness and it would be a lot for anyone to deal with. And how do you turn that off to protect your own self and your own emotions and your own well-being? Um, there's been days when I've stayed in bed with the blankets over my head and I wasn't dealing with any kind of that intense of emotions going on. So it makes um it makes sense. And I love how you put that in the beginning of your story because it's a real, it just helps, I think, people to understand that all of us have stuff that we go through, and sometimes it's okay to hide under the blankets.
Yeah,
If that's what you need, then do it. Just don't stay there.
for sure, exactly. And I think, it still is one of my favorite ways to regulate, where I think it's like a break from our senses of
Yeah.
picking up all the stimuli and it just quiets some of the noise. And so, I think it's really like an act of self-care
Yeah.
to do that, whatever that looks like. And now it's probably a little bit more baths and like a little bit more uh,
Yes.
proactive care so that I don't have to have this spiral like I did back in the day. But
Yes.
yeah, it was heavy stuff
Very heavy for sure. Yeah. And then you did spiral.
for sure.
You really spiraled. And um there's a part of your book or part of your story which I think all of us, certainly women, I mean, I've done it a few times and I would imagine most of us have. And you wrote, as life went on, crying in the shower became the new norm for me. Even despite my on paper perfect life, until one day everything changed. And it was the day I was too sad to stand. And then you go on to say, it was the day I finally asked for help.
Mhm.
There's a amount of courage that comes along with that. I think a lot of us cry in the shower.
Yeah.
I think it's just if that's the place it happens. And I think though that for you, like you said, it was the day I was too sad to stand.
Mhm.
And then you were able to reach out and get help. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it was, as humans, we can wait until we are in just a significant pain before we're willing to make a change that can be very uncomfortable to go and talk about your feelings or what's been troubling you. And it really does take a lot of courage, so much courage. It's why some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
especially if they don't feel safe with their emotions, which many don't because, growing up, it's like, suck it up, buttercup, and boys don't cry, and don't be a wuss, and like, we don't, I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah.
It's some of that traditional, or I don't know if we should say traditional, but just some of that.
Some of that old school.
Yeah, exactly. And so it just took courage to really admit to myself, probably more than anything, like I'm really struggling here. And,
Mhm.
um, it just wasn't, we just didn't talk about our feelings like we do now. There was nobody outwardly saying, like, oh, I have depression. And until I think the first time I realized was in 2009. And it was a celebrity who was speaking out about his depression. And it was like, wow, like that's so brave. And it was all about like ending the stigma. And it might
Yeah.
have even been around the Bell Let's Talk like initiative when that first came out. And
Yes.
it was like what I needed to hear. It was his permission, I think.
Hmm.
So I think that's why I'm just so passionate about speaking about this because it really does take a lot of courage. And from that like moment of getting help, my whole trajectory changed for the better
Hmm.
because I no
Hmm.
longer had to live in that painful place. So
Hmm.
yeah, if just I hope that people, anyone who reads this or hears this, like really just asks for help. And I promise, like people want to help. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think that that's one of the reasons we write these stories, because
Hmm.
we don't know who's going to be reading them and we don't know who's going to need some help. And just like you saw that person on TV, somebody's going to pick up this book and they're going to read your story and they're going to go, "Hey, maybe I need to step myself up here and start taking better care of myself and reach out and get some help." Um, yeah. So when you went for help, I thought this was a really interesting thing that happened in your story. So you went for help and you were having a one-on-one with a lady, and she asked you, "What do you think is easiest to change?" And she said, "Your thoughts, your feelings, or your behavior." I thought that was so insightful. Even when I read yours, I thought, oh yeah, because it really lands quite well. And you said you weren't really sure, but you said my thoughts, and she nodded, and just like that, something began to shift for you. So can you tell us what was going on? What was the shift?
That was, and I say this in the book, like it was like the heavens opened and the angels sang. It was this moment of like it clicked of like, what? You mean I have control over my thoughts? I had never realized that. And what she was teaching me was the cognitive cycle, how our thoughts will create our feelings, and then our feelings will create our behaviors, and then our behaviors will reinforce those thoughts. And it just was this empowering moment where I suddenly had this newfound power that kind of felt like a superpower. And so I started actually, and I didn't include this in the book, but I started, this is before cell phones. I kept like one of those little pencils from the golf course, that's just like little, with a little paper in my pocket. And I put a little tick on it every time I had a negative thought.
Wow.
And I was blown away with how many ticks were on that paper by the end of the day. It was like a tallied up mess. And I took it one step further where I started to write down what I was saying to myself. And it was so incredibly mean. And so if I'm thinking these thoughts, no wonder I'm feeling terrible inside. And then no wonder my behavior is reflecting that of like, I just need to get under the covers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was just this really insightful, like profound moment where I realized for the first time, like, wow, like I actually can do something about this. These thoughts aren't thinking me, like I'm thinking them and I can change that. So,
Wow.
my business name is called Guide Your Mind from that moment
Yeah.
because when we realize we can guide our thoughts, we can change our trajectory. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, if going on to that, you talk about standing in the mirror and looking at yourself dead in the eye while pinching your stomach as hard as you could and muttering, "You're so fucking fat."
Mhm.
And then you go on to say that it was as if I was the meanest of the mean girls bullying living inside my brain.
Yeah, like so there's the movie The Mean Girls.
Yes.
And it was like I had that, the meanest of those mean girls in my mind all the time. And and it was just so loud and she would just like chirp at you like over every little detail. And and once I realized like what was happening, I just I think I say this in the book, like it was like she didn't deserve that microphone. She didn't deserve center stage on the microphone. I think I said something like that.
Mhm.
And it was so freeing and liberating to break free from that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
What would you say? Because I think that's so common, especially with women. I think men have those negative thoughts as well as, of course, but I think us women are really hard on ourselves. And there's all sorts of societal reasons that contribute to that. But what would you say to somebody who's listening to us right now who is just got some nasty thoughts going in their head? I know for myself, I can't remember what I did today, but I did something and I called myself silly. Oh, that was silly, Julie. And then I stopped myself. And I'm like, that's no, no, be careful what you're saying to yourself. So what advice do you have for someone that's dealing with mean girls in their mind?
Yeah, I would say one of the best gifts that I've given myself and, would encourage others to tap into is self-compassion. There's a part of you that's just having a hard time in that moment. And to let the voice of self-compassion be louder. And so I don't know if we'll talk about this later, but like my son and I were making this book called Making Friends with Feelings because I really like to personify our feelings. And so my version is called Compassionate Claire. And so she's in here all the time. And I really love when there's a sprinkle of humor that she adds into this voice in my mind. And so one of the things that I often will say to others in a session or just in my own mind is really about like lovingly notice. We don't want to be like, oh my goodness, here we go again, thinking
Yes.
this mean girl thought again, because that doesn't feel good.
No.
And so by tapping into, say, compassionate Claire, we can really just soften and get it into being curious and realizing like all of
Mhm.
these thoughts and our feelings, they all come from like our often unmet needs. And so how can we love ourselves through this more? Because do
Mhm.
we need more love or more hate? More love or more fear? It's always more love. So
Yeah.
self-compassion is really the answer. And it's a real game changer when I talk to myself like a best friend. If I'm sad, like, oh, Candy, like, what can I do for you? Can
Aw.
I take you somewhere and get you anything? Like, it's my treat,
Yeah.
which is quite silly, but it just feels good because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, like a best friend.
But that's the way we should be to ourselves. If we can't be our own best friend, how do we expect others to treat us well?
I agree. Like, we have to care enough about ourselves that we
Mhm.
always try to reach for a better feeling thought. And
Yes.
I don't mean like false positivity,
No.
but really just like caring enough about how we feel that
Yes.
we will always try. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you tell us about the book? Because you and your son are writing a book together.
Yeah, so it's just a little fun passion project, making friends with feelings, where we're personifying all the feelings. Well, not all of them because there's so many, but many of the common ones. And so, fearful Freddie, he's there, and I mentioned him in the book. Because sometimes he'll have the pedal to the metal and think everything is a threat when, in reality, not everything is. And so just acknowledging like, oh, fearful Freddie's here. He's just trying to save me. His whole
Mm,
goal in life is to keep me like safe and to survive.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't really care if I'm like really happy. His main concern is like, I'm safe and surviving.
Yeah.
And so all of these feelings, they have underlying needs, and so by adding these fun little names to it that we're coming up with together, it helps him understand, but also helps. My hope is like other people understand. It's a way to soften and lighten up a little bit when things can feel heavy and hard sometimes. And so, Angry Amber, I talk about her in the book, and she's, like we can sometimes judge anger, but
Hmm.
she's just there to like advocate for you and let you know you have some unmet needs here. And she's not somebody we should, banish, but we should get curious of like, what does she need in this? Like, why did she show up? And so we kind of talk about it like, who's in the room with us? And so just a little example, when we were first starting this, I was doing the at bedtime, and like repairing, like, oh, buddy, I'm sorry, I was being grumpy Greg today. That
Oh.
wasn't fair to you. I probably had some unmet needs that I wasn't paying attention to, and I'm so sorry. And then I said, and you know what? I think like here comes guilty Gwen. She's like mom guilt's best friend.
Yeah.
And so she's chirping like you shoulda, woulda, coulda,
Yeah.
right? But we also know like settle down and then like oh, and here comes sad Sally. She's here also. And then I'm like having a little tear and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I should have handled that better. And then he's so cute. He's like, Mom, sometimes we can have more than one feeling at a time. I was like,
Oh.
that needs to be on the cover because ain't that the truth? Like it's both
Yes.
and like both can be true. And
Hmm.
sometimes there's a mixed bag of feelings.
Yes.
So just to find safety with our feelings, like we don't have to um shut them out and suppress them. We can like
Hmm.
invite them and just they just want a seat at the table. They
Yes.
just want to be heard. It's kind of like a little kid who's like,
Yeah.
mom. What we
Yes.
resist persists. And
Yeah.
so by just like whew, like,
Hmm.
ooh, Fearful Freddy is loud today.
Yeah.
And to have a bit of a dialogue with them.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's
Yeah.
fun little project. We're making little
How old
emojis
is
with
your
them.
son? Sorry, how old is he?
He's 7.
Well, what an amazing thing for a 7-year-old to say, and a boy.
Yes, I love that because he has way more emotional intelligence than I had even in my mid 20s. So
And what were you saying? You're making,
oh, we're making like little emoji, like I think they're called like Genmojis, like
yeah,
little characters. So they match how their name is. They look
yes,
like Fearful Freddy. He looks afraid.
yes.
And then we're gonna also, or this is more on me, but like have 20 different points for each little character. So like what's happening in the nervous system for them? What is, so, are they in a fight or flight state? What does their facial expressions look like? Their nonverbal
Mm,
communication? Are they, like their eyebrows, like
yeah,
scared
yeah.
looking? What's their heart rate? Do they have clenched fists or like a clenched jaw? Like Angry Amber, she would have clenched fists and a clenched jaw and like,
Yeah,
ugh, right? And so
yes.
trying to help, the reader of this book, uh, learn all the cues because then we can notice, our emotions. It's just energy in motion,
Yeah,
emotion. And
yeah.
so to pick up on all these cues and really, my hope also is that parents understand some of the drivers underneath what we would consider behavior and see it through the lens of the nervous system and through emotion as energy, because it always comes from just unmet needs or underdeveloped skills. So my
Hmm.
hope is that, it's good for parents and for kiddos and just brings
Yeah.
more safety to those conversations and allow.
I think it's wonderful because, I growing up, we were told, What are you crying about? I'll give
Yeah.
you something to cry about, all right? Get outside. Da, 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 da. So feelings were not in the majority of our households were not something to be concerned about. But I love what's happening now. I
Mhm.
love what's going on with this next generation of kids. And to have a book like that for kids to recognize how they're actually feeling, because so often people just go off. They have no idea, and they have no idea why they're acting the way they're acting because they're not in tune with their feelings. So good for you and your little guy.
Oh,
You
thank you.
have
Yeah.
to let us, you have to come back on when you've got that book all
Sounds
ready to
good. Yeah,
go.
it's just a fun little passion project, but
Yeah.
we're excited about it. So,
Yeah. Well, so you also talk about your dad, and I love this part, this sentence in the book that you wrote. In sharing that special memory with him, we laughed together while I was sitting on Dad's knee for the very last time.
mhm.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your dad and what was happening in your story?
Yeah, so it's a really special moment. And, you know, I feel so grateful that we were able to heal our relationship. And, he was a
Mhm.
great dad and he showed up for me, as I mentioned in the book.
Yeah.
And, he really was there all the time, anytime I needed him, but sometimes emotionally just guarded, like in protection mode and without meaning to. Uh, and so one day I came to him and just said, like, Dad, because we would butt heads, sometimes. And Dad, I just would really love to feel closer to you and feel connected and just like share about our emotions and in all this coaching work I've been doing, would it be okay with you if I shared something that's really helped me and that I think would really help us grow closer and we could really support each other? So it's just like this loving place I came from, and he was so open to it when I said it that way instead of like reactively, like, Dad, you're always blah, 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 whatever, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so he just opened and softened, and
Mm.
he became just my absolute favorite person to have as like emotional support. If I was going through a hard time or a transition or whatnot, he was my go-to. I'd come over for coffee, he'd call me and say the coffee's on, and he'd hear me
Oh.
out, and I'd always get the double hug. And
Aw.
so I just feel so lucky that I had the communication skills to heal our relationship and which took a lot of courage as
Mm-hmm.
well. But yeah, he just became so open and available, like emotionally available and
Yes.
expressive. And so hearing him share what his experience was like as a parent and knowing how hard I try as a parent, it just melted away any last bit of resentment or anything that I maybe didn't
Mm.
even know I was still carrying.
Yeah.
And so in the full circleness of it all, just because I worked in hospice and because I was there at the hospital with him around the clock, um, or almost, my mom and I always traded.
Yeah.
Um, I really had that opportunity say more than I
Mm.
say more than I feel like I even needed to.
Yeah.
Like I got to say extra, and I feel
Yes.
so grateful because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't get that opportunity.
Oh,
And
yes.
so yeah, to just sit on his knee one last time and have a laugh and remind him of the time when he was driving my little two-door coupe and how funny he was on these, I talk about it in the book. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just meant the world that I could have every little ounce of courage to
Yeah.
say everything in my heart that I
Yeah.
ever wanted to. And in fact, a month or two later, after he passed, I had found a piece of paper folded up that I had written on things I want to tell my dad someday. But at the time, I was too afraid to say.
Yeah.
And it was just like I did it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was
That's
very
beautiful.
special.
I think that, like you said, it's funny how life comes round with us, right? Like you dealt with, you were dealing with hospice and all of the emotions and everything that goes with it, but you also learned. And you said, I know the regrets, and I'm not going to do that.
That was
Yeah.
probably one of the most significant insights I could have gained because I
Hmm.
know that regrets sneak up on us.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
often not realized until it is a regret.
Yes.
And so by having that insight, I would like fast forward and imagine what will I regret if I, if this person passes away or if I pass away, like, and not to
Yeah.
get too morbid, but
No, no.
it's important
No,
to
we're
think
all,
about that. It helps us
yes.
get in alignment with our
Yeah.
values and how we want to
Yes.
show up. And so,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's another book for you.
Yeah.
What I learned about what we shouldn't, or what the regrets I've learned about that maybe we can take care of so that we don't regret. Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
many when we
There's
really
so
stop to
many.
think about it.
Yeah. Well, Candace, I am just so pleased with your story. It is just, it's, I, it's a great story. You did a fabulous job, and it's so you're so honest, and that's so helpful. I know it hurts to get it out, but it's so important because even as you're talking now, I'm getting and I've read your story. I got some insights from it, but as you're talking, I'm also getting more insights, and I think that's what that's what it's all about. We don't know what we don't know, and until we know it, and when somebody picks up your book and reads your story, we don't know where they're going to be in their life or what's happening in their family. And but you did the hard work, you dug in, you got it done, and it's going to be so helpful to people. I know it. Just like this little podcast is. It was
Yay.
just, yeah. So I thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a beautiful experience. Like I said, just very healing and cathartic. And to put words to my story and to see the full circleness of it.
Yeah.
But it felt like at the ending of a chapter and the start of a new
Yeah.
chapter. And so it feels
Yeah.
very symbolic
Mm.
and sort of just where I'm at in life as well. So I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for the opportunity. It's been just such a
Oh.
wonderful experience. Yeah.
Oh, well, I am so glad that you reached out and that you did it. So it was perfect. So,
Yeah.
well, everybody, Candace's book right here. Okay. It's The Space Between Before and After, Women Like Me. It's on Amazon. You can also reach out to Candace and she can certainly get you a signed copy if that's something that you would like as well. There are 11 beautiful stories in this book. And Candace, of course, is in chapter 11, which is a very spiritual number. And I think that it was a very you were meant to be where you are. So I think that's wonderful.
Oh,
Oh,
thanks
well,
a lot.
thank you for doing this. Do you have any last words you'd like to say to the audience?
Hmm. You know, I think thank you for the opportunity to ask me that and to say that. I think what I would really want to dial home for anybody listening is, sometimes we can feel really stuck and like there's no room to go in our relationships.
Mhm.
And I would just challenge that because people are either in connection mode or protection mode. And our past conditioning will really, it'll like put us in one of those lanes.
Yeah.
But with softening our communication, with learning communication that doesn't trigger the other person's defensiveness, people are able to heal those relationships. And
Mhm.
I've helped many people do this. And sometimes they don't even have a reference for what a really great apology could sound like
Yeah.
or how to articulate what they're feeling, and sometimes we can get
Yeah.
caught in the blame game. But, what I teach is the relational neuroscience. So communication skills that feel safe to the other person. And
Mhm.
so you're not stuck in one of those relationships. If there is a relationship you want to heal with your parent, your child, your spouse, whomever, like it is possible. And so I just would want people to have hope, knowing that, just little bit of work we can do together in a couple sessions, even like people are changing the trajectory of those relationships.
Yeah.
And if it's with their kids, which I love to do that family work, it's cycle breaking work.
Yeah.
And it's so profound. And
Beautiful.
so, yeah.
Oh, well,
Okay.
thank you for that. And you trigged my memory. I want to let everyone know that we will have a link to the book, but we will also have a link to reach out to Candace if you would like to speak to her about anything at all. So the book link is going to be in the show notes as well as Candace's information. Yay!
Yeah.
Oh, Candace, well, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for being willing to come on and be vulnerable and talk about your story and these just really important things. I appreciate it very much.
Oh,
Okay, everybody. Until next time, thank you for being here, and we'll see you again. Bye bye.
bye. Thanks so much.